All right. Hello. It's me. Hi. Um, let's take a look at the job document workshop that I've used many, many times before. We're gonna go through it really quickly um, and get you what you need now to preface this whole thing. These are job documents for getting a professional job, work, internship, etc. This is very different from an academic portfolio. It's very different from portfolios you may turn in for school requirements or to get academic jobs. This is purely data and facts that I've compiled from research, from the years of watching people use resumes and portfolios to get jobs. So and it's been a while since I've looked specifically at this slideshow in like a lot of detail. So excuse me if there are errors on it, and I'll correct things as I go along. So the first thing I want you to do is think of this as like sort of a holistic package, right? These things all work together, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to tell a narrative about who you are, what you're good at, what you care about, what you bring to the table from a skills perspective, all of those type of things. Um, and I say here that it tells a story of all of these things, but like job related stuff only, please. And so this is kind of an interesting line because we have a lot of fine artists, people with really interesting hobbies, and I think that there's space for the narrative in the narrative for those types of things. But we want to be selective about what you guys are telling potential employers, what's sort of valid information, because you have limited space to do it. And so a lot of this is being picky about what you're choosing to include, I guess. The other thing it's doing is it's showing skills and competencies in a very dry way, right? So this is a marriage of like how your brain works and what you care about, and also like what you can do. All right, so we're going to start with cover letters. Cover letters are sort of going out of style. You know, I'm a big fan of them personally, because they're the only time you get to say like very casual, not casually, but with prose, with just writing why you're a great fit for somewhere. And so oftentimes cover letter actually takes the form of an email, right? Um, Sometimes it's just when you're reaching out to someone for the first time, an alumni connection or somebody that you've met in a networking event, or somebody who used to go to your undergraduate program, or whomever. This is the only time when you get to really just like lay it out there with exactly the nuance that you want. And so that's why I love them, because resume, you're asking people to infer things. Portfolio, you're asking them to infer things. Cover letters have the ability for you to just spell it out, right? And so this is the place where you can say who you are while you're applying to that specific job, and explain why those things are connected. And I like to talk a lot about what you care about a company, what kind of things you think align with the work that you've been doing in school, or the things that you care about from an architectural perspective. This often takes the form of sort of three paragraphs. Who am I? Who are you? And why are these things connected? Is how I like to sort of frame it, essentially for you to give some background space. All right. So I think that we're going into resumes next. Uh, I'm just going to give you a moment to appreciate the memes. Why snort and sniffle my allergies away. All right. So your resume is a very dry document, right? It's a list of your skills, your relevant work experience, your education, um, just very straightforward document, right? Um, You want to, and you'll see this on Google a lot, like when you're looking for resume tips online, it'll say to directly address the listing. But what you don't want to do is regurgitate like full sentences from a listing. Hiring managers will notice that you have copied a job listing verbatim, and they're not crazy about that. But keywords or key phrases are where you want to sort of like look and reference. And again, this is like a high level of customization. So I want you to think about this as like there are sort of multiple versions of resume that you can make for someone. There's like sort of the company that you care a lot about and you really want to impress them and you really identify with them. And so it's important for you to tailor your resume to that experience. And then there may be a more broad document that you use for places where, like, yeah, it'd be nice if I got a job here, but like this is not my one true love. But you're going to do the same thing, right? Is you're trying to create the same things. You're trying to create a compelling argument for why you match with what the company is looking for. From a graphic perspective, and I say graphic perspective, but it's really just a functional perspective. It wants to be one page. I know it can be really hard. I've seen some of you guys come in with 2 or 3 page resumes that have all sorts of volunteer activities, work experiences. You're involved in a lot of different things. You have a lot of awards or publications. And I think that you want to be careful about what you're choosing. You want it to match your portfolio's graphic sensibilities. So if you've chosen a couple fonts that you're using in your portfolio, I would reuse those here to sort of make it graphically cohesive. You want the font to be legible when it's printed out. And this means I see a lot of like people adjusting margins to fit more in. You want it to be able to be standard margin. No one's going to do custom print settings when they print your resume out. So you want to make sure that when you hit print with all your default settings, it comes out and it's legible. I mean, I say in the 11 to 12 point Times New Roman range. And what that means for me is just like, tall enough that somebody can read it without squinting. Again, spacing wants to be sort of appropriate. You don't want to cram a bunch on the page, but you don't want a ton of negative space either. Talked about the margins. Reserved use of color and graphics is important. A lot of people will print these mono. So whatever it is that you design on your resume needs to be legible when it's mono printed. That means with no color, right? Black and white only. You want it to be a PDF file when you're submitting it places, not a Word document. It can be a 1 or 2 column layout. I'm not particularly I don't care specifically. Normally for my own personal resume, I use a 2 column layout. There are people who will tell you that's a horrible, horrible thing and you shouldn't do it. And one of the reasons they tell you that is because there's something called an applicant tracking system, ATS, and ATS are the automatic scanners that scan resumes for keywords and fill out spreadsheets and things. And if you have a 2 column resume, sometimes ATS cannot scan them. I would worry less about that in the architecture field. I've not seen anyone have real issues with a 2 column resume. I've seen plenty of people get callbacks from lots of firms, even with a 2 column. Years ago, I had some students who offered to let me use their resumes, and so I wanted to show them to you. So this is a 1 column resume. You can see it's pretty brief in terms of like what's going on at the education. We just see the dates, and then we've got work experience with some bullet points underneath. I would probably, if I were going back now and critiquing this resume, I would probably tell the student that the grays are too light, that they're going to be hard to read on screen for people who have not perfect vision. So I would probably redo that. And I'm not going to go through the nuances of what's listed here, but there's more on that. You can see that they have, though, very clearly delineated out education, experience, and skills. Okay. Another one that's a little bit more, that looks a little bit more like a letter. There is a ton of negative space here that I probably would say, like, why, how can we fix that up? There's some sort of unnecessary space here with the Bachelor of Arts in Architecture and the Bachelor of Architecture. For my undergrads, I've seen this listed a million ways. There's no one right way to list this. I think it's fine to say that your Bachelor of Architecture is pending 2027, for instance. Totally fine. This one includes references at the top that are baked into the work experience. You can certainly do that if that's something that you're interested in. References are not super common to include on a resume anymore, and the statement references upon request is not necessary anymore. So you might see some old advice, or if you're asking your parents to look through your resume and they say, where are your references? Or it should say references upon request. People know that. They'll ask you for your references when they need them. A lot of times for summer internships, they don't ask you for references. The awards here are done really well. So if you've gotten awards from Rice or other places, it's nice to see the name of the award, but it's very important that you specify and contextualize those awards. So it's not enough to say that you won the Peck Freshman Prize, but to understand that this is a freshman studio award for quality of work, personal growth, and studio participation or service, or, were you the top student? Was this based on your portfolio? Was this a fellowship? And what was the travel fellowship about? And then the skills again. Two more, 2-column resume here on the left, and you can see there's gray added to help delineate where those spaces are, where those columns exist, but the gray is super, super light so that everything is still legible. And this one on the right, I really liked that she pulled out keywords from her experience and highlighted them in a really subtle way. It's not a bold, it's not underlined, but it's obviously noted out what are the main skills that she's pulling from this experience. Now I would probably, and I may say this on a future slide, but I would include a little bit more information. So we are looking for instance, for commercial buildings, I would want to know square footages. We'll get into that in a minute. So the content for this, obviously you want your name and contact information. You're going to want an address for where you are currently located so that the people who are hiring you understand if this is a relocation for you. If you are going back to your hometown and you have a residence in that place, or you're working in New York and you plan to stay with your friend who has a residence in that place, you can use that address as your referring address. New York is notorious for sort of wanting you to be a New Yorker in order to apply and work for their company. So that may be something that you want to do. For education, I want to know the years of graduation. I want to understand if you're graduating now or what year you are. How close are you to the finish line? Some companies only want to hire you if you have 1 year left in your program, for instance. Obviously, your skills are a big one. That's one of the first things I see people circle when they're going over resumes, is whether or not somebody's got the software that they're using. I have a lot of feelings about that, but I'll save our time. What's your previous job experiences? If you don't have a ton of job experience, we'll talk about that in a minute. Any relevant research, coursework, or publications that you've done that would help support you getting a job at this particular place can be really helpful. If you haven't had direct work experience in sustainability, but you've done a lot of sustainability work elsewhere and you're applying to a firm that cares a lot about sustainability, that's a very useful thing to include. And then extracurriculars, memberships, and awards. And those things want to be, I don't want to be too insulting when I say this, but they want to be impressive things, right? And so like being just a member of something as an affiliation, you could do a list of affiliations that just have those organizations, but I don't need, for instance, to know that you were a studio representative and you went to meetings every time and you came back and told your studio what happened. I do want to know if you did something fundamental for that group. So were you the president? Did you organize an event? Did you help manage something? Were you a peer mentor for 2 people and you helped them through their transition to Rice? All right. So your name and contact info. For your name, you want to use the name that you want to be called at work, probably. So I've definitely had places where I used the name Jacqueline and I was called Jacqueline the entire time. You don't need to mess with your suffix or your middle initial. You'll see like, let's see, Jacqueline N. Schaefer, Jacqueline N. Schaefer Jr. I wouldn't include those unless they're like extremely important to you in terms of your identity. I would match your name with whatever you have on LinkedIn because people will search your LinkedIn to see if you have a presence there. You can include a pronunciation for your name if you'd like. What I don't show in here is whether or not you use an Americanized name. And so I have a lot of feelings about this. I think you should use whatever name you'd like to use. There are studies that have shown that using an Americanized name performs better on the job market. Honestly, like my philosophy on that is that you need to use the name that you want to use. And that's what you should do. All right. So you've got plenty of support from me for whatever name you choose. You want to use a personal email address for your contact information that will not go away. So like if you are graduating, I wouldn't use your Rice email. I would use something that's permanent. And make sure that if you use a personal email address, that it is not embarrassing. I still struggle with my personal email address feeling young when I use it. And then again, we talked about the mailing address. You might want to use your home address if you're applying in your hometown. Do you want to use photo? No, you do not. This is really common practice in other countries. In the United States, it's considered, potential HR discrimination issues. It's not advised in the United States if you're trying to get jobs in the United States. Other countries, heavily dependent on the country. Happy to talk to you about what the standards are for those countries. All right, education and work experience for your resume. You want to include your degrees and years. I see this all the time, pending 2024, expected 2026, or just the date 2026 clearly means that you haven't completed your education and you're still working toward it. Something I'll see sometimes with people is I say like areas of interest, or you can include your thesis topic. I like areas of interest because we don't have focuses within our major here, but that would give you the opportunity to put some areas of architectural interest that you have that maybe aren't apparent anywhere else in your resume. So you could put areas of interest : sustainability if you felt like you didn't have sustainability work experience. Show them that that's something you care about, if you have space. If you have a thesis topic, that's amazing too, because you could say, thesis : and then talk about what your thesis is. What's not great is a generic course list. So like ARC 101, Principles of Architecture, means very little to a resume reviewer. You do not need to include your program type. If you're an MArch student for us, you don't need to include option 1, option 2, option 3. Those are not standardized terms, and they can be confusing to people who are not familiar with our program. Oh, sorry. So it's fine if you don't. For your work experience, you want to use reverse chronological order. You want to include the month and year, the city that the company was in. You can include unpaid work experience. If that's like volunteering for Design for America or something like that, totally fine. You want to figure out what the achievements were at each place. So I want you to think about your work experience and go, what did I take away from that? What were the things that made a difference? What were the skills that I gained? What were the new and improved parts of me that happened because of this job experience? And try to figure out what those are and lead with those. You can include organizational leadership or competitions if they show specific skills. So if you participated in a competition for a firm, or you led a team for a nonprofit pro bono competition like Sandcastle or something, you could do that as well. You're going to want to look for gaps and hole fillers in your resume. So like if you're looking at a lot of job descriptions and you're seeing that you're missing things, thinking about what parts of your life or what parts of your lived experience could fill the holes for those things can be really useful. The biggest thing I tell people, the biggest correction I make on resumes is to quantify and contextualize. So if you tell me that you did a residential project, was that a 2,500 square foot custom house? Was it a residential block building with lots of units? How many units? How many square feet was the house? Commercial building, was it retail? How many shops was it? What's the average square footage for those shop spaces? You can definitely estimate these things, but we want to understand how large of a scale the projects were. For hospitals, it's really common to be referred to by bed size, 300 bed hospital, something like that. And then confidential projects need to be included discreetly. So you can include those projects and just say confidential client and be very vague about the nature of that client. But describe the project as, a residential project, for instance. With your awards and your skills, you want to be picking awards and skills that show, like, that have a purpose, right? So like you get lots of awards, you may have a lot of recognition. What are the ones that are valid for what you're trying to achieve right now? You want to be specific about what they are. Obviously, I already said this earlier, that you want your awards to have some context. If you do competitions, you're showing competitions, I would like to know if you won them. I would like to know what you placed. I would like to know how many submissions there were, potentially, something like that, to give me an idea of how impressive that competition was. If you're including publications, if you co-edited Platt, how many readers do you have, or how much of a print run was there? How many issues did you run? For skills, you want hard and soft skills. So it can be things like your software skills and your modeling skills, but it can also be things like, I have no idea, soft skills. I mean, things like hardworking, detail-oriented leadership, these things are pretty vague, so I don't like to use those. Actually, I would have to really see some good soft skills as an example to tell you if they were any good. And then don't grade your own competency. Oh, here's a mistake. And don't include obvious skills. So don't grade your own competency is important. I see progress bars. I see stars and dots. I see pie charts. Don't do any of that, because if, for instance, you think that you're completely fluent in Rhino, but the way that a company uses Rhino is completely different from yours, they're not going to agree with you, and they're going to come in with high expectations that you have fluency in it when, you know, you either are learning the program or you're not. In my opinion, I would just leave it at the software name and be done with it. Those types of like discussions about how good you are or what you know often happen during your interviews. I do like a qualifier for languages, conversational, written and spoken, business, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Especially if that language is part of the job description. So for instance, H Mart in New Jersey hires people. They want individuals who are fluent in English and Korean. They want you written and spoken in Korean. So knowing that you can do that is useful. Okay, let's move on to the next one. I'm going to take a drink of water first, though. Okay, what do I do if I have no job experience, right? You're a freshman, you're coming in. My first question for you is, do you have volunteer experience? Do you have design charrettes or competitions that you've done in the past? Anything like that that can help you identify skills, basically. You can place emphasis on your education. So you can include areas of research focus, interests, classes that you've took that are standout classes that help support the story that you're telling about who you are and what you're great at. You can include externships. RAMP has, I think, the 29th is when RAMP's externship application closes this year. There are 2 times, once during the winter break and once during the spring break. So you can include things like that as well. Do you include retail jobs? Yeah, you can. If you have no other work, but you know, like I grew up working in a kitchen. I definitely use that in the beginning to show, hey, I know how to show up on time. I know how to respond well to management. I can follow instructions. Like I know how to do a job. It can be helpful. And then try to figure out what the relevant skills are from these experiences that would translate, right? So like, did you organize something? Did you design displays for something? Did you work collaboratively to solve problems? Sometimes it's a stretch, but you can kind of pull things out of those experiences to come up with something that feels like it's relevant and useful. Okay. Do not, like I said, call yourself detail-oriented or hardworking. Those are definitely things that lots of people put in their resume. They don't mean much, and you can show if you're detail-oriented by being meticulous about your documentation. I don't like the third person or the first person. So I worked on X, Jackie did X. There's sort of like this like non-noun oriented language for resumes, assisted in the creation of ... Do not employ cliches like team player, go getter, hungry for success, unicorn, things like that. Like I said, don't grade yourself on your skills. Don't regurgitate verbatim the job description. We talked about that. And the last one, which is hilarious to me, is don't make your own logo. I found this logo legitimately on someone's resume online and could not stop laughing at it. Just like, I mean, it has to be really well done and it has to be really unique and interesting and restrained and like a million other things for it to work. In my opinion, it's better off focusing on the architecture and less on custom logo creation with your initials. All right, I pulled these quotes from an AIA interview series a while ago, but I think that they're really great things to think about. So the first thing is, you know, design and practical experience. So trying to show a balance between those two things. This is our first impression of the applicant's ability to provide the service of designing and documenting design information, right? And so That's why these resumes are so different from the guides and the templates that you see online for most other industries, because we are trying to show that we can do visual information, right? So it needs to be visually organized and beautiful, which is not a problem. You guys have these skills. You can absolutely do it. Okay, good for less experienced job candidates, good conceptual design work in school, good graphic design. Common mistakes, sloppiness, typos, bad graphic layout, poor writing, not making things personal to the employer. Again, this is a balance where if you are headed into the permanent job market, you may want to take more time with these individual applications, but you're going to hit a limit where trying to balance this job search with all of the other requirements you have with studio and the rest of your lives, you have to find the balance of like, how much energy can I put on these individual applications? And what's the tier where I stop doing that? And I kind of have like a broader document about who I am that I send out. Play around with where that is. I think what I like to do is I like the energy and the effort to match sort of the desire to work at the place, right? So like if it's somewhere you really love, try your hardest. And the less you care, the less time you spend. All right. So portfolios, and these are the portfolios for job applications. Sometimes they're called work samples. They're portfolio and job application, or portfolio and work sample for job applications are kind of two different documents, but we'll talk about them both. So for a standard portfolio, your faculty members at Rice are pretty great at giving good graphic design feedback for your portfolio. So feel free to reach out to your studio profs or to anybody who you trust to ask them their opinions on it. When I review portfolios at my desk, typically what I'm looking for is narrative cohesion. So do I understand what you're trying to tell me? Is it cohesive? And are there any missing things? Do I not understand how the project is oriented? Do I not understand what the point is? Things like that. And some of your faculty members are going to be able to tell you, oh, I don't like this font, or I don't like this alignment, in ways that could be really helpful to you. I typically do not give that kind of feedback because my concern is always that we don't want all of your resumes to look like they came out of the same process. They need to be reflective of who you are and your skills. And so meeting individually with faculty members who know you can be really helpful for that. All right. You're trying to hit 20 slides / screens / spreads. So for me, that's what you're seeing on the screen here. Would be like one spread. Some people lay these out so that they look like a book. So it's 2 8.5 by 11 pages together. Some people do it more like a board. There are a lot of different ways to do it. You want the format to be PDF. There will be firms that have a 5 megabyte or 10 megabyte maximum size requirement, which is bonkers. But there are lots of ways to do compression to make that work. For job market portfolio, you do not have to be in chronological order. For the Rice portfolios that you guys do, especially the undergrads, I think they do. I'm not sure. You would have to check with John and Rado on that. But for job market, they can be in any order you want. You're telling a story and they can go in any order you need to. I like to lead with the best stuff, the best project, the project that feels the most like you, because as somebody's looking through your portfolio, they're going to spend the longest time at the beginning, and then they're going to start tabbing through quickly to just see what else you've got. You can include your resume on a page and a table of contents page. You can include those in the front if you'd like, or in the back. The resume in the back, obviously the table of contents wants to stay in the front. But you can include your resume in there if you don't want those to be separated documents. Like you can have it where it's always in your portfolio no matter what. And when I say 20 slide screen spreads, I don't mean that's not inclusive of table of contents, a cover page, a back page, if you want to include those. This is like 20 spreads of content. Be intentional with your color and font use, of course. Make sure you match your resume, or more to it, that your resume matches whatever you're doing here. Okay, so there are two approaches in terms of organizing this as a file that I've seen that are effective, and you could certainly come up with more ways. The first way is what I call project sheets. And so this is how a lot of firms put together proposals for jobs. They'll have a sheet for each project that they've ever done. And those they can put in and collate in a specific order. Choose the projects they like that work really well for the job they're trying to win, and then put them in the correct order that they want. that allows you to create a highly customized portfolio for each of the jobs you're applying for. The other thing you can do is you can do it all in InDesign. And that makes some of the changes easier to make across the board because they're consistent. They're not separate documents. It's up to you how you do that. Okay, here are the things I want you to think about. Relevance, right? You want to reflect your studies, the current issues of today's, architectural landscape, and your employer's focus, if you'd like. For me, the most important thing is the narrative. What is the story that you're trying to tell? What is the process? So we're trying to utilize this document as a way to show how your brain works, where your talent is, and what your process really was for creating this thing. I want to know the story of why, right? So what was the project and why did you address it the way that you did? And you can do that with images. You can do that a little bit with text. You can do it a lot of different ways. It is important that your graphic design and your design intuition consistency are there. So like if you set up a few different layouts for your portfolio, you want to follow those few different layouts. You want, pages that are two facing pages and then a full bleed page. And then you don't want to probably cut it up a bunch of other different ways. You want to make sure that you use just a couple of potential layouts to keep that document predictable and with good rhythm. The second that you start to move around the layouts too much and it becomes unpredictable, when people are looking at that document and they're getting distracted by the unpredictability of the layouts, like where am I trying to find this information? If every single time you start with your text and your basic information for your project on the top left side, and then 3 projects later it's on the right side, why is it over there? They've suddenly lost focus on the work. All right, general applications. You want a range of projects. You're trying to just hit like, these are all the broad typologies, scales, approaches I've done. You're trying to cover your bases. You're not trying to be super redundant. You're trying to show within each of those projects a range of skills, right? Did you do renders? Did you do plans? Do you have physical models? Do you have 3D like axons that you want to show? Like what are all the documents that you want to show? So you're trying to show that broadly across the document as well, and then scales as well. So like small to big projects, small to big documents and details to site plans to maps, right? And you want to show your range of skills in terms of like your softwares and things like that. If you have a certain firm that you're trying to really get into, you're going to want to get as many of your projects that you've designed as you can into the same typology, right? So like if they're a residential firm, you're going to pull every residential project that you have. Unless you hate it, don't include work you hate. So like, for instance, if you're trying to get into a housing firm and you have no housing, anything unit-based could be great. Schools have classroom units. Mixed use has retail units, site-oriented designs, things like that. Projects of similar sizes can help. You want to still include a really broad range of your skills and the scales of drawings to show that you can do a lot of different types of representation. And then, do you have any other work outside of studios or even outside of architecture that's responsive to that firm? And so like, did you do a competition, healthcare competition, and now you're trying to get a job at a healthcare firm, for instance? Or projects or research in an area of the world that they specialize in. I've seen people successfully do photographs of a city that the firm was doing a ton of their work in. So showing that they've traveled to that place and that they've photographed it. All right. Additional thoughts. Do not include projects you dislike. What you don't want to do is get into an interview and somebody's like, tell us about this project. And you're like, I don't like it. Like, it's not a great vibe. So cut them or improve them and make them something you do like. You can do a combined document, like I said, for easier graphic changes. Be careful with words. A lot of people don't read the words. And so you want to keep it sort of short. You want to make it very clear. I've definitely seen people who do sort of a header that's got like where the project's located, what the square footages were, who the faculty member was if they want, whether or not there are other team members. It's very important that you show when you have team members, especially if your team members did some of the work that you're representing. Okay. FAQs for this. How do I include partner projects? You can include the partner project work. What I would suggest you do is lead with the images that you created. I would not include anything that you could not verbatim identically reproduce, right? So it's fine if you did one elevation or you did all the elevations and your friend did all the sections and you use some of the sections and you could recreate those sections, no problem. It is not okay, however, if your friend did amazing, incredible renders that you cannot produce on your own, because someone's going to look at that and think that you can. So you want to be honest about sort of where your skills are relative to that. Again, how is this different from application to school or preceptorship portfolios? Those documents have different requirements. The stuff that I'm outlining here is just based on job market performance. Preceptorship portfolios and things like that are super intense. Like they're very like, they're like the whole, they're your, all of your documents. They're everything that you've done. This is a much more truncated, abbreviated, curated document that is just for getting jobs. And what if I don't have enough projects? I've seen people earlier in their careers include fine arts, photography, tech projects, sculpture, furniture, all sorts of things like that. So there are some things that you can use instead. This would be the time when I normally take questions. You guys feel free to reach out to me anytime with any questions. You can find me on LinkedIn. My handle there, my name is Jackie Craig Schaefer. And you can, of course, email me anytime you'd like with any questions that you have. Hopefully this was useful for you and you have a great time on the job market. I exist for any questions that you have in the future, and good luck.